Tonight, I'll be telling 10 stories with no particular theme, accompanied by a campfire ambience. From stories of mannequins, cryptids, the paranormal, and much more. Just because this video is set up to be relaxing, don't think there isn't a chance of fear. Remember to send in your story if you'd like to have it featured. You can either submit it at my subreddit, r/slumberreads, or my email you can find in the description. Be sure to drop a like if you enjoy. It really does help out the channel. Subscribing if you're new is also very much appreciated. Enjoy the video. And as always, I hope you all have a great night. It never truly registered to me that she was gone until I saw her again. When I was told she had died, the feeling of detachment was instant. The part of my brain that was dedicated just to her froze and shattered. She couldn't be dead. Romilly couldn't be gone. Not truly. There was no way on earth the beautiful girl I had shared a mother with was dead. And yet when I saw that fucking mannequin, it finally clicked. It was grotesque, emotionless, a mimic. It was an exact replica of my Romilly, and yet every time I looked at it, a heavy weight curled upon my chest and suffocated me. How could Dad be so content to have that thief around him so much? I remember the first time he showed it to me. He was so pleased with himself. He hid it under a red cloth and pulled it back like a matador prepping for a bullfight. Every time I remember him like that, I want to throttle him. How could he be so fucking proud of a monster like that? When my eyes met its cold exterior, it took me a few moments to realize what it was supposed to be. It wasn't Romilly. It couldn't be Romilly, even though it was her face staring back at me. It didn't have her youthful smile or her innocent excitement. It didn't possess the warmth that floods whoever spends even 1 minute talking to her. No, it had a disgusting expression that insulted who it was supposed to be in tribute to. It's strange. It wasn't the appearance that shook me to my core, but the air that clung to it like a plague. I knew it was supposed to be Romilly, but I wanted to dismantle it with my own fucking hands right then and there. I wanted to rip it to shreds and spit on it, even so much as thinking it could even replace Romilly. And with that strong sway of anger came a surge of overdue grief. She was gone. My eyes opened wider than Dad had ever seen before, and my usual grimacing expression dropped even lower. I knew then that I had insulted him by the way his demeanor curled into itself. My anger was replaced with a pluming acknowledgement of Romilly's absence. My hands subconsciously tangled themselves in the hair above my ears as my palms covered them, almost as if they knew what was to come and were trying to protect me from it. I screamed then, harder than I ever had in my life. It was harrowing and continuous, like all the trauma locked away in my head was trying to escape in one fluid sound. It scratched my throat on its way up and only stopped to take a heaving breath before picking up where it left off. My hands pressed harder against my skull. It felt like my head would expand and expand until it popped if I didn't. Dad froze during this process. Hell, I would have as well if it was anybody else. But when the screaming stopped, and I stood there with my mouth agape like a fucking dullard, he covered the monstrosity with the red cloth and stood in front of me with his hands held up, treating me like a rabid fucking animal. Then these great, shivering sobs came that racked my body and exploded in a crescendo of wails. I couldn't stop. For the life of me, I couldn't stop. She was gone. She was really gone. And all that remained of her was this stupid skinwalker. I felt the shift in Dad before he even truly noticed it himself. He was rightfully concerned about my sudden nervous break, and with that came the pungent anger interlaced with pent-up fear that so coiled around my dad's heart and clouded the good man inside. "Stop it, you fucking basket case," he barked at me, clenching his fist to try and regain control. I looked him dead in the eyes then, and I must admit, I was intimidated by him. But instead of shutting my mouth and being quiet, another forceful caterwaul barreled out of my chest and filled the air. He knew then that he was helpless to stop me, causing him to puff up even more. Dad hated losing control. He hated that he had lost control over me, the one person he had been able to toy with like a doll. I wanted to stop. I wanted to submit and let him lock me in the basement. I wanted to wake up tomorrow and have him force me upstairs to make yet another mold of Stranger's rotting corpse. I wanted familiarity. I wanted a figure of authority to guide me. I wanted someone else to be in control of my decisions, but I couldn't stop. I never thought I would hear myself begging to return to the bathroom with the stench of dead meat funneling up my nose and dripping into my veins, encasing the carcasses of people into molds for my father to do with what he pleased. He loved his mannequins, and I shouldn't have insulted his most prized one, the one he hadn't let me help him with. It's been a few days since he showcased that disgusting mimic to me, and it's everywhere he goes. I can't escape it. The expression on its face void of any feeling. He carries it around with him, setting it up in the corner of the room to watch me. He hasn't let me out of the basement since the grand reveal, and sometimes when I turn towards him and catch his glare before he manages to elude my line of sight, he almost seems pensive with deformed malice. It's the glare he gave Romley the last time I saw them together. It has only just occurred to me that I'd never been told how she died. Me and my father were always close. I had a great childhood. Lots of memories, good and bad. My father was always there for me when I needed him the most. Me and Greg, my father, always loved hunting. It became a passion after Greg took me bird hunting. He didn't let me shoot, but I was there watching. One thing I could always remember was the whistling. Greg used to whistle while we were walking. We had an interesting tactic of walking. We went further away so we couldn't see each other. This way, we could guide all animals to a single spot. My dad would always whistle on and on. Sometimes I would meet him in the forest while walking. He would have the same smile on his face as always, and I would each time say, "Nice whistling." His smile would always grow larger, and he would turn the other way and walk off my peripheral vision. This would happen on most hunting trips in the same forest. My dad didn't whistle in any other forest, just this particular one. One day I asked my father, "Dad, why do you always whistle in the northeast forest?" He looked stunned when I said that. "What do you mean, Jack?" "You always whistle while we're walking, and sometimes we would meet." "Jack, you were the one whistling all the time." That made me question my sanity. How could this be? "I'm positive I saw my father on the trips whistling." I asked, "Did you see me while walking?" "Yeah, of course. You would always smile when I said you were good at whistling." Then I told my father to forget it. So, I always thought that he was whistling, but somehow it was me the whole time. There was only one way to end this. I went to the northeast forest on my own and listened the whole way through for whistling. Halfway through the forest, I heard it. The same whistling as every trip. I continued to walk the trail. After about 10 minutes, I saw something. Someone from the bush came onto the trail. There was something familiar about him. I just couldn't put my finger on it. Then I realized he was wearing a very similar outfit to mine. He kept on whistling and walking. I shouted at him, "Nice whistling." After a few moments, he stopped and turned around, mouth in a big smile. It was me smiling. The other me said, "Your family likes me whistling, and for that, I'm not going to kill you." I was nervous and just smiled back. He started walking in the other way. When I couldn't see him anymore, I ran. When I got to my car, I was out of breath and exhausted. I couldn't believe what I saw in the forest. When I went into my car, I could see in the trees a man that looked identical to my father whistling. He was smiling and waved at me. I floored out of there. When I got home, Greg was sitting on the couch watching TV. I didn't tell him about the encounter, but I told him to never go to the forest again. I never want to see the man again. The northeast forest is a hot spot for missing people, and apparently me and my father were very lucky that we liked whistling. There's only one rule. Exit your home and go forward. It seems so simple just saying it. You'd hardly think it was a test at all. I never really gave it much thought until one fateful eavesdropping. I was squishing a bread roll into a ball at my uni's cafeteria as the table next to me argued about their childish scores. 18 miles, Megan. I made it 18 miles without stopping. That has to be a local record. But you went around the houses, Alex. Well, I wasn't going to go through them. I popped the little bread ball into my mouth, and something obvious clicked from those words. It's in the name of the game. You can't just go forward until it's inconvenient for you. It has to be truly forward. If there's a wall, you climb it. If there's a river, you swim across. And if there's a building, you really have to open a door and go through. No matter how awkward or dangerous. I'd known about this silly game since I was old enough to listen, and even attempted it a few times when I was old enough to hear all the superstitions, but I never once tried to play it the right way. I have to assume there aren't that many that have. A sudden slap to my back made the bread ball fall out of my mouth. My friend Kat was struck with inspiration. I'm going to play it for real this time, Bray. No going back. And so, she did. There was nothing more to it. Kat never backed down from a challenge, even when she really should have. I've called enough ambulances to know. But I guess that's how a tough girl gets good at climbing, surviving, record breaking, and being one manipulative fucker. If she was missing that last trait, maybe I'd have talked her out of it, but no going back was her sworn mantra. That was 2 weeks ago, and so much has happened. There were too many texts that didn't make any sense and couldn't possibly be true, but there's one thing that matches up. Kat went forward. Every time she shared her map location, it was on a perfect straight line. Before I get into the messages, I'm going to share every superstition I've collected from friends about the forward test. I want to know if they match up to what any of you might have heard. If there's something I'm missing, it could better explain the last message she sent, so please let me know. Well then, no going back. Pack for as long as you plan to play, and only take the test alone. If you bring someone with you, they'll know you're cheating, and you don't want to be caught cheating. The first 20 doors you go through will require nothing more than a clever excuse to enter. From that point forward, you may need a clever excuse to leave. If the building you must enter has more than 10 floors, always go to the top floor before exiting. You won't want to miss what might be waiting there just for you. Count your doors, and find a way to measure your miles. You'll be glad you did when things no longer look the size that you remember them being. The farther you go, the more people will try to lead you astray. An elderly woman in need of a favor, or an old friend who wants to get coffee may appear. If you're only 10 miles deep, it's still safe to leave the path. The test will end there. Any point after 10 miles, do not stray, and do not engage with those outside the buildings, no matter what incredible or horrible things they show you. The 30th building you will enter will be blue. If it is any other color, turn around and go back immediately. Once you enter the blue building, you are a guest of the home. Remove your shoes at the door and bow to all you meet. There will be a feast of all your favorite foods readily offered to you. Kindly decline all but one offering. Do not leave without eating it. If they bring you your shoes as you exit the back door, it's safe to leave. If at any point on your journey you see the squinting man painted to look like the wall behind him, exit the current building or enter the next one as fast as you can without making a sound. If he hears you, he will open his eyes, and there is truly no advice for what happens next. If you must set up camp along your path, do not stay in any spot for more than 6 hours. After 50 doors, this will be reduced to 40 miles. You'll know it's time to move on when a certain sound starts. It doesn't need description. You'll know it when you hear it. In one of the buildings, you open a door to a white hallway that appears impossibly long. Do not enter it. Close the door and open it again, and the hallway will be shorter. Continue doing this until the hallway is no more than 10 feet long. Be sure to do this quickly before the hallway resets. If you open the door to the long hallway and see something running toward you at an alarming speed, close the door and do not open it again. You will have exactly one chance to close it. The thing that runs will never stop chasing you if you open the door even one more time. Go back the way you came. Do not attempt the test again. At either 300 miles or 100 doors, you will find a broken table holding a rusty old pin. If you choose to accept the pin, you must never take it off for more than 1 hour. If this is maintained, you will see good fortune. The journey is now over. Return to your home. Do not continue going forward. Nobody ever has. They will not allow it. These were all the superstitions surrounding the test that I could remember. After Kat's test started, her early text messages all seemed to confirm that those were nothing more than lame stories from bored teens. And then she shared her adventures of trying to sweet-talk her way inside people's houses. Stuff like she needed to make a phone call, she was there for an inspection, or sometimes she would just make a mad dash for their back door or parkour right over their roof. She even had the cops called on her twice, but she managed to escape both times. In the beginning, I was actually excited for new messages. It sounded like she was having a blast and living life exactly as I could always expect from her. Wild and carefree. That sweet summer child just didn't know the meaning of fear. That was, until she started finding real reasons to feel it. It was about a week after she set out, and I started getting multi-paragraph texts. She had made it 100 miles. Or at least she thought she had. According to her, nothing here looks like it's supposed to look, so it's hard to tell. She never explained what she meant by that, but instead started telling me about the horrible things she hears at night, and that night stays too long now, and how she wishes she ate less than they gave her, and that the buildings weren't fun anymore. The messages became less and less coherent the more forward she went. Some of what she said sounded like the tales we told each other growing up, but far more of it was unfamiliar, and so much more disturbing than she could have come up with on her own. I really don't know what to do. The location updates have stopped, but I'm still getting messages. Even so, this just isn't like her. I know they're only supposed to be stories, and it's just a silly game, but I can't help but worry. And that last superstition I shared has me more than worried of all. You see, of all the strange and impossible messages I got from Kat these past couple days, the most alarming one said, I broke the record. No going back. This story happened to me about 2 years ago, while I was working at a small Mexican fast food chain in my hometown. All names, including the restaurant, have been changed. I swept vigorously at the lobby floor, as I had intended to leave this forsaken fast food joint hours prior. However, the hungry people of this simple town seemed to have other plans, as here I was just now finishing up mere minutes before midnight. But of course, I couldn't quite leave until I had thoroughly cleaned the lobby floors. I look over to my 2 coworkers, who have just wrapped up an order through the drive-thru window, and are getting ready to close up their stations as well. Scott, my manager, a man of shorter stature, adorned in his coveted black fedora, starts to do the counts for the night. Meanwhile, Brad, my other coworker and best friend, is doing the dishes in the back. Brad walks out into the kitchen area, adjusting his ball cap, with some fishing brand on it. In the 3 years I've known him, I can't remember seeing him without a hat covering his dome. In fact, if it wasn't for his messy sideburns, I'd have assumed the kid had no hair at all. Scott, when do you think we are going to be done here? Whenever you get those dishes done, bud, replied Scott, not looking up from counting his drawers. Brad looked over to me, then at the dirty pans that Scott had yet to bring to him. Scott, come over here so I can smack you. I put my earbuds in, smiling as I did so, the bickering only a subtle intrusion to the music. As I finished sweeping and grabbed the mop bucket, which I had luckily prepared earlier, just as I was about to start, the bickering stopped, and was replaced by a faint beeping noise. And it sounded very familiar. It was the intercom. Someone was at the drive-thru. I looked at the clock, which read 11:59. That meant we were still open for 1 more minute, and we had to serve them. I took out my earbud, greeted by the groans of my coworkers as Scott proceeded to walk over and take the order. Welcome to Taco Loco, home of the Pocos Locos. How may I help you? Scott says through the intercom, feigning enthusiasm. However, there was no response. Scott waits impatiently for about 10 seconds before piping back in, rolling his eyes. Order whenever you're ready. Nothing. I guess they drove off the... Before Scott can finish his thought, a ear-splitting metallic screech blasts through the speaker. I could only describe it as what it would sound like if you put glass in a blender. Son of a... Scott exclaims as he shuts off the intercom. I guess they weren't ready, jokes Brad. Although he looks unnerved as well. Scott looks at the clock, which now read 12:01. Well, he can just go home then, Scott says, getting back to closing. I laugh and proceed to begin mopping the floor. However, I keep an earbud out just in case. I can't deny that sound was strange, but I still am more worried about getting my work done so I can just go home. After finishing up, I call out goodbye from the counter and go out the back door. The town at this point is dark, with only the streetlights to illuminate the way. I approach my truck, which I had parked behind the building near a small forested area, which leads into the nearest neighborhood, but stops suddenly when I see some sort of movement from the trees, only barely visible due to the small amount of light cast beyond the building. Still on edge from that strange sound, I tried to inspect what had moved, but to no avail. Whatever it was must have slipped into the trees, but I keep looking for a moment to be sure. Just as I am about to just head towards my truck, I see it again. Something moving in the trees, with pale white skin being exposed by a strand of light. Judging by its size, it must be a person, but something tells me it's not some weirdo walking around naked in the woods for no reason. My suspicions are then confirmed. As it emerges from the brush, it crawls on all fours, despite having a humanoid build. I'd have to guess if it were to stand up straight, it would be well over 6 feet in height. Its skin has a smooth texture, with faint shades of gray. However, what terrified me the most was likely the reason I am alive. Whatever the creature was, it lacked anything resembling eyes, and the only notable feature I could tell from where I was a slit where a mouth should have been. I dared not move, fearing this thing could sense me somehow. I watched as it crawled a few paces toward my truck, then proceeds to stand on its back legs and turn its head as if looking. Then it crawled, tumbling over into the bed of the truck where it couldn't be seen. Whatever that thing was, it was waiting there, like it knew that someone would come eventually. If I had left the building minutes later, I wouldn't have seen it, and something tells me I would not be here to write this. I turned quickly and darted towards the back door of the restaurant and started banging on it. Maybe not the brightest idea, as I could hear it stirring behind me, but I refused to look, only focused on calling out, hoping someone would open the door. That's when I heard it. The metallic screeching started ringing again from behind me. Somehow that creature was emitting that sound, and my eardrums were being tormented by it so badly. I started to lose my balance. I could feel it coming closer, and my disorientation increasing. Just as I thought it was upon me, the door swung open, causing me to stumble into the restaurant. I looked back, but saw nothing, and the noise had stopped in an instant. I was almost convinced it didn't happen. However, my ears still hurt badly. I stayed at Brad's house that night, leaving my truck at the restaurant, not wanting to chance the prospect of it still waiting in the bed. Of course, I didn't mention the creature, still not entirely believing that what I had experienced actually happened. The next day when I picked up my truck, there was some rust and deterioration in the bed of my truck that I swore hadn't been there before. Needless to say, I didn't work there much longer. It started about a week ago. First it was my friend Molly, and then it was my friend Gillian. Both simply vanished one day, and I haven't seen them since. In fact, no one has, but everyone else doesn't act like it. I'm the only one that seems to have noticed. It wasn't an issue at first, you understand? When my friend Molly didn't come into school the next day, I simply thought she was either sick or just bunking off. She had a tendency to do that. It was when she failed to show the next day, and then the day after that, and the day after that. That was when I really started to worry. I spoke to several classmates, All were adamant that Molly had been in class just a few hours prior, but when I asked them to tell me what she was wearing, none of them could remember. In fact, none of them could remember what she even looked like. It was shrugged off. I thought everyone had gone mad. I spoke to my best friend Mike. He, too, was sure that he'd seen Molly in school after. I was sure she'd disappeared. He didn't treat me like everyone else did, though. He assured me that I was under a lot of stress, so I was imagining shit. So in essence, he called me nuts too, but in a nice way. He couldn't appreciate the stress I was feeling was down to what was going on, that my friend was missing, and no one believed me. I was certain something was going on when I texted Molly a few days after her disappearance. I didn't receive a reply until 3 a.m. that night. This number does not exist. Please don't try to ring or text this number again. There is no Molly. I even tried to report it to the police a few times, showing them that text, but still, no one believed me. According to everyone else around me, Molly wasn't missing, and I was the one losing my marbles, not them. At the same time, though, no one could describe her in detail, nor could they describe their supposed encounter with her. So yeah, it was weird, and I was scared. The following week, my friend Gillian stopped showing up to classes. It was the same thing, so I decided to visit her house. I spoke to her mom, and apparently Gillian was staying with her dad. So I went to her dad's, and he told me that Gillian was with her mom. I was terrified that I was losing my mind, having some sort of psychotic break. I couldn't comprehend what was happening, couldn't understand the terror that was cascading through my mind, my body. I stopped sleeping after Gillian. So this brings us to the present. I haven't been able to find Molly and Gillian. I preserved with their phones, though. And I wish I hadn't, because I've been receiving some chilling texts from both of their numbers, even after I'd blocked and deleted them. The texts come through in waves, and always at 3 a.m. If you know what's good for you, you'll stop interfering. You'll act like everyone else does. Your friends exist, and yet they don't. We exist, and yet we don't. The texts are all similar in nature, all cryptic and strange, and frankly, they scare the absolute shit out of me. I don't even reply anymore. I did at first. I sent frantic replies, demanding to know what happened to my friends, but after those responses, I soon gave up. I've even started to turn my phone off at nights. There have been other unexplainable and terrifying things happening to me. I've been seeing an old man outside my window at night. He stands barefoot, silhouetted by the dim street lights, a wooden cane in hand. He smiles at me and gestures wildly for me to come out. I try my best not to look at him, but sometimes I can't help it, and I always know that he is there. I really don't know what's happening, and I'm scared. All the fucking time now. 2 days ago, my best friend Mike didn't show up to class, and when I tried to call him, there was no dial tone. Instead, I heard someone breathing heavily down the phone. I didn't try to call him again afterwards. I've been to his house. There is no one there. I asked the neighbors, and they told me that the family had gone away for the weekend. I didn't believe them. Why would I? Their car is still in the driveway, and the lights in their house were on. I've started to receive calls now, too. All from unknown numbers, a few from Mike. I try my best not to answer, but sometimes the calls are so relentless through the night that I really have no choice. The calls would wake me up. I'd answer groggily, weary from the constant onslaught of calls and messages. And the strange thing is that all I would hear is static, accompanied by heavy breathing. I think I'm going to break soon. My parents are worried about me, but they can't seem to grasp the fact that it's to do with everything that's going on. They think I should see a therapist. They haven't noticed that Mike, Molly, and Gillian are gone. I can't explain it, but I know that I'm not insane. A few hours ago, I received a text from my friend Mike. "Hey pal, I'm with Gillian and Molly. We're outside your house. Come out, bro." I ignored him, and then seconds later, I received another. "Steven, don't ignore us. We know you're there. Just open the door, man. Open the door. We have some amazing things to show you. You won't regret it, Steven." I looked out my window, and sure enough, they were there. All 3 of them, and they were accompanied by that strange old man. They all suddenly looked up at me and started waving, gesturing for me to come out. All were smiling wildly. Their eyes, though, oh my God, they were glowing. I locked myself inside my bathroom. It's where I am now. I was so scared. My phone was blowing up with calls and texts, but I was trying my best to ignore them. I could hear a distinct knock on my bedroom window. I don't know how they got up there. My bedroom was on the 3rd floor of our house. I have another text from Mike. Steven, you have to let us in. I promise everything will be okay once you do. There are things, Steven, things beyond humanity's comprehension, and those things have chosen us to be their vessels. Ah, Steven, it's so wonderful. I hear a window smash downstairs, and then I hear feet rapidly run up the stairs and suddenly stop outside my bedroom door. Another knock reaches my ears, and then I hear a voice. Hey Steve, it's me, Mike. Come open the door, he says cheerfully. I stand at my bathroom door, my breathing rapid, and my heart is essentially in my mouth. I don't say a word, and I am as quiet as I can possibly be. Then Mike speaks again, but this time, his voice is different somehow. It's deep and guttural, and it booms across the house. Steve, we are taking you with us whether you like it or not. Don't make this hard on yourself. Just open the door. Someone that is not Mike shouts. The voice is demonic, and it sends a shiver down my spine. Suddenly, my bedroom door is smashed open. I can hear it flying across the room. I'm crying now. I hear a number of feet walk in, slowly shuffling toward my bathroom door. I try to ring my mom. She doesn't answer. I text her, pleading for her help. I try to call the police, but all I hear is static. They are knocking on the bathroom door now, whispering to me. I can hear them in my head. The voices are soothing. They want me to trust them, and I feel myself being drawn to the door, being drawn to them. I feel so much calmer now, and I really want to see them. I'm going to open the door now. My fingertips blindly brush across the drywall for a few moments before finally feeling the light switch. In my old place, I would have made a nighttime expedition from the bedroom to the kitchen without the use of a light, but my current apartment is still unfamiliar, and I wasn't confident I could make the trip free of a stubbed toe or banged shin, so I squinted my eyes in preparation for the incoming light and placed my finger on the switch. Please don't turn on the light. The request was at a volume not much louder than a whisper, but in the silent void of my living room, it might as well have come through a megaphone. It jerked me from a state of semi-consciousness to stunned with fear in an instant. A cold sweat forming at my temples, and the hairs on my arm and neck jumped to attention. The little force it would take to flip the lever at the tip of my finger completely left my body. My name is Thomas. He said in a calm, measured tone. I'm not going to hurt you, Adrian. A clear attempt to pacify me had the opposite effect. Hearing my name in the stranger's voice seemed to set the world at a slanted perspective, and I could feel the rhythmic thumping of my heart. Still, couldn't force myself to move. All I need you to do is listen for a few minutes, he said, still calm but now mixed with a bit of desperation. I actually lived in this apartment before you. I've actually been here for a few years now, and I had no plans on leaving, but in March, my landlord sold the building and new management took over. They informed me almost immediately when my lease was up in the summer. There would be a significant rent hike. I was devastated. I had just barely been able to afford the old rate. I was already working maximum hours at the store, and my bosses told us we shouldn't expect any raises this year. I looked at other nearby apartments, and it became apparent the entire area had crept out of my price range. Thinking over the possibility of starting somewhere new, I got desperate. About 6 weeks ago, when I was at my lowest, I made a mistake. I was lost in thought after work, and I hadn't noticed the flyer until the key was already in the knob. A neon pink paper, carefully taped to my door, cut through the dreadful thoughts of realtors and commuting costs. I pulled it off the door and read the header. Ordinary people wanted for clinical studies. The flyer was pretty light on information. It didn't explain what the study would be about, when it took place, or even include a phone number. It only included an address and how much they were paying people to participate. Before March, I would probably have ended up trashing the paper, but with my current situation, I couldn't turn down $1,500. It certainly wouldn't pay my raised rent, but combined with my income, it would buy me a few months to figure out what to do next. Without a listed time, I was worried I would miss my chance. Without even entering the apartment, I clutched the neon pink lifeline in my hand and made my way back to the car. The address on the paper was a little bit outside the city limits, but I made it there in 25 minutes. The place would have been a good example of the word nondescript. It was a large rectangular building with almost no details or design flair across the surface. Just large mirrored windows in every space column, and rows across its surface. It was past regular business hours, and there were only a handful of cars parked outside. Still, I wasn't going to let a rising level of doubt or the strange feeling in my gut hold me back. Almost jumping out of my car, I rushed up to what appeared to be the only entrance. The door was made of the same mirrored glass that surrounded the building, but on the top half of the window was a logo and the name of the company. A three-dimensional yellow and orange hourglass where the lines overlapped and attached in an impossible way. The name, Homa Dynamics, printed beside it. The growing feeling in the pit of my stomach that something was off made it hard to breathe. Feeling myself losing the battle against it, I unfolded the flyer and reread the amount I would be paid. With my resolve restored, I pulled open the small door and entered a small reception area. "Welcome to Homa Dynamics. Please fill out these papers." A young blonde woman in purple medical scrubs welcomed me from behind the desk. Pinned to the pocket in her medical garb was a name tag that read, Nurse Mel. She also wore a small smile, but her uninterested eyes gave away it was performative. She rummaged through a filing cabinet for a moment and pulled out a clipboard. With her other hand, she grabbed a pen out of a coffee cup and held both out in front of me. I grabbed them and made my way to a chair on the other side of the room. There were only two papers on the clipboard. The first was an information sheet that only asked for my name, address, and basic medical information. The second was a non-disclosure agreement. To fit it all on one page they had printed, it almost seemed too small to read. I attempted to skim the NDA for a few seconds before giving up and signing. I got up to return the papers but found Nurse Mel was already a few feet away from me. Her hand outstretched for the clipboard and pen. She took a quick moment to look over the paperwork. When she was satisfied, she placed the pen in her breast pocket and brought the clipboard to her side. "Follow me, Thomas," she said, beginning to head deeper into the building. "Please keep in mind that by signing this paperwork in my hands, you have agreed to not discuss anything you will see in this facility. If you do disclose any information to industry professionals, members of the media, or personal acquaintances, you will be breaking this agreement and be open to legal consequences. Do you have any questions for me at this time?" While she explained the agreement, we moved at a brisk pace down identical sterile hallways. The concrete block walls, laminate floor, and foam tile ceiling were an identical color of white. Heavy metal doors painted the same color, and fluorescent light fixtures were evenly spaced throughout the hallways. It only took a few turns to feel disoriented, and I wondered if we were going in circles. "What is the study about?" I asked. "What am I going to be doing?" Nurse Mill stopped beside a door, no different than the mini we already passed. She placed her hand on the doorknob and pushed it open. Turning towards me, she made a motion with her hands indicating I should enter. "Information necessary for your participation in the study will be given when it begins. Please keep in mind that in order to protect our proprietary information, the full context of the study will not be revealed to you." I stood for a moment, wondering if Nurse Mel would say anything else. I was met with the same static smile and look of disinterest I had gotten used to from her. Knowing I wouldn't be getting any answers, I stepped through the doorway, a rush of air hitting my back as the door closed quickly behind me. The room I stood in made me feel foolish for considering the hallway devoid of detail. Everything from the floor to ceiling was made of the same white plaster. The room was lit by 4 lights recessed into the ceiling in each corner of the room. In the entire space, there were only 2 objects that really stood out. The first being a camera mounted high on the wall directly in front of me, and the other, a pull chain light hanging from a cord in the middle of the room. Besides feeling a bit out of date, The light texture hanging from the ceiling wasn't that odd. What hung in place of a normal bulb was what drew the eye. It wasn't an average glass bulb, or even one of those fluorescent ones that snakes around itself. Instead, screwed into the socket was a 10-sided object made out of a gray material that looked like carbon fiber. Each of the 9 sides not attached to the light fixture had a quarter-sized glass peephole that reminded me of portholes on a boat. Even from the door, I could see a strange swirl of colors moving around the inside of the closest hole. Place your hand on the chain, but do not pull the chain. A heavily disoriented voice demanded from the camera. I was still mesmerized by the colorful movement inside the object, and jumped when the voice started talking. I was just recovering from the sudden confusion when the voice repeated its order, but this time with frustration noticeable through the distortion. Place your hand on the chain, but do not pull the chain. This time, I followed the order, walking up to the object and grabbing the beaded metal chain. As soon as my hand got its grip, the voice from the camera returned. The lights will shut off. Do not let go of the chain or pull the chain. The moment the last word was said, the room was bathed in complete darkness, the only lights remaining from the echo of the fluorescent in my eyes. The gut feeling I had pushed out of my mind was back with a vengeance begging me to leave. But before I could act on it, the voice shot through the darkness with a final order. Pull the chain now. Without a thought, I pulled the chain in the room filled with the lights I'd never seen before. From the same source, lights of many different colors tie-dyed the room. They moved swirling and twisting off one another in a way that was not planned or completely chaotic. Like the colors were alive, but only lasted a few seconds before a loud pop came from the object, and the room was once again dark. After a moment of confused darkness, the fluorescent lights that originally lit the room turned on. I turned at the sound of the door behind me opening and saw Nurse Mel standing outside it with the same disinterested smile. I must have followed her back through the hallway maze to the reception area, but I don't have a clear memory of the trip. I do remember her handing me the check for the full amount on the flyer, and then I must have made my way to the car in the parking lot. My first clear memory after the study was pulling into the parking lot from my apartment. I had the visor pulled down because at some point during the trip, the moonlight coming through the windshield was too bright. I think I had a day or two of normalcy, but I find it hard to remember a lot of events after the study. At some point, the migraine started. I'd be fine when I woke up in the morning, but when I'd walk into the sun, it felt like my head was filled with razor blades. I tried a few times to get to work, but I never got to the parking lot before feeling lightheaded and nauseous. More and more, I started sleeping all day with the curtains pulled. Dreams of dancing colors moving in a way that defied purpose and chaos. At some point, I no longer remembered going to sleep. I'd simply come to my senses in the apartment after sunset and lose myself to the colorful void when it rose. I started worrying about brain tumors or some other awful disease messing with my brain. But I had missed too many days of work, and any treatment would empty whatever meager savings I had left. Not to mention most specialists work during the day, and the thought of going outside made me physically ill. Even going to the emergency room at night ran some risk of being caught out in the daylight. Near the end of any semblance of normalcy, I tried to get into contact with Homa Dynamics. The colors that now plagued me had originated in their study. But even a deep search online turned out next to nothing on the company. I found a few links to personal stories posted on boards around the internet, but at that point the glow of the screen was starting to hurt my head as bad as the sun. I started spending my nights in total darkness. I didn't realize how bad it was until I came out of the void of dancing colors one night. I realized I had been gone for more than a day. Everything I owned had been moved out, and your things had taken their spots. I have tried to talk to you a few times, Aiden, but it is getting harder to pull myself back from the other side. You are so rarely not bathed in some light source. I need your help, Aiden. I need you. I still don't know what made me flip the switch. Thomas had been talking for a while and I had calmed a bit from when I first heard his voice. Still considering the content of the story, I was sure I'd find a half-crazed man on the couch. Instead, the room was empty. I spent a few minutes searching every corner of the apartment. There was no sign of anyone. A few days have passed and I have decided that Thomas wasn't a dream or auditory hallucination. He was really in my apartment, and he still might be. I spent a few hours each night sitting in the dark listening for his voice. I have not had success yet, but I'm going to keep trying. I want to talk to him again and find out how I can help. My motives aren't totally altruistic though. I need answers of my own. I didn't acknowledge it right away, but when I hit the light, I think I saw him for just a second. In my head, I have the image of a man, a little older than me on the couch, only he was right. Everything from his skin to his clothes were translucent. His outline, though, wasn't one color. Instead, it was many colors moving in a pattern neither purposeful or chaotic. More and more I find myself dreaming of those dancing colors. This happened about 3 years ago. My friends and I are driving home after a rave. It was about 2:30 in the morning and we had just dropped off our other friend and were making our way back to the highway. It soon began to rain. Not heavily, but definitely not light. We were driving over a short bridge over a river when we saw him. He seemed to be a fairly tall man with a pea coat. He was walking along the side of the bridge with a cane, just like Annie Sr. would. He was walking the same direction as us, so our headlights only got his back. I was driving at about 35 miles per hour, so we were able to get a look at him, except when our headlights illuminated him, the back was all black. As we drove past and looked at him, his front and his body were all black. This was the silhouette of a man walking out in the rain, on the bridge of a solitary stretch of road on an impossibly early Sunday morning. 3 seconds after driving past, he simply faded out of our lives forever, as if he was just another pedestrian. My friends and I both recognized the eeriness of the situation soon after. We both shared a look of quiet understanding that we both saw the same thing. Then, she asked to hold my hand and squeeze really tight until we were back to the highway. I'll cut to the chase. I think my neighbors have been replaced. For the sake of this story, you can call me Jonah. I live in a small town in Ohio. There's nothing really special about this town. Just a dilapidated building masking as a post office and something called the town sorehead. I haven't quite figured out what that means yet. I moved into this little town at the beginning of the year and currently rent a one-bedroom apartment poised on top of an old barn. The apartment isn't much, but as a first-year college student, it's nice to have some place to call my own. From my tower on top of the barn, I can see for miles around and bask in the flatness that is Ohio. Coming from Colorado, where every direction there's a mountain, Ohio was a bit of a change for me. Despite what I've heard about sleepy nowhere towns, this one is okay. Everyone knows everyone, but they mind their business for the most part. Not to mention how friendly the neighbors are, and if I didn't know any better, I would think I was in the South. It's this usual friendliness that brings me to this current predicament. Sometime in February, before the quarantine happened, I met and talked with my neighbors. They are a lovely bisexual couple who live in the house next door. One of them was quieter than the other and seemed distrustful of me at first. The other was warm and welcoming and promised that if I ever smelled barbecue, I could come over for a plate. Of course, I haven't gotten that barbecue yet, but that's not the reason for this story. I'm an insomniac, and spend plenty of nights staring up at my bedroom ceiling or sketching in my notepad. About a month ago, I was having one of these nights. I was sitting in the chair I had placed just outside of my window for nights like this one. Surprisingly, 3 in the morning is the best time to truly listen to the world. There's always the soft chirp of crickets, owls rustling about their nightly flights, and the twinkle of wind chimes in the background. I was staring out across the darkened street that's only illuminated by a single lamppost, doodling in my sketch pad when a flash of blue-green light lit up the sky. It was only there for a second, but after it faded, I noticed 2 things. The world was eerily silent, and a gaping hole stood where my neighbor's house once was. I rose from my chair, grabbed my phone, and scrambled to call the police when another flash of light lit up the sky. Carefully, I approached the window. Just moments before where a gaping hole had been, now stood the house, seemingly untouched. I spent the rest of the night battling with myself about whether I should call someone or not. Instead, I decided to wait and speak with my neighbors in the morning. I watched and waited for the first signs of life from the house, and around 10 a.m., I saw the back door open. The quieter one was out on the patio with the dogs, a cup of coffee in her hand. When I made my way across the street and over into their yard, she spotted me and smiled brightly. "Well, hello there," she said, lifting the cup of coffee in greetings. "Hey." I paused a few feet away, hesitant to ask the next question. "Did you see anything weird last night?" "Weird?" she repeated, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Ah, yes, weird. Synonym to strange or abnormal. No, I did not see weird." Her eyes stared blankly back at me for a moment before she turned and beckoned for their mini poodle to come inside. She picked up the dog and returned back into the house, leaving the coffee cup on the table. Curiosity got the best of me, and I looked over into the cup. Not only was it empty, but it was spotless, as if freshly cleaned. When I looked up, both of them were standing in the doorway watching me. I forced a smile onto my face, picked up the cup, and held it out as they pushed open the door. "You forgot your cup," I said, trying to think of anything but the silver eyes that stared back at me. Had their eyes always been that color? "Thank you." They both nodded in unison, took the cup, and retreated back inside. As I walked away, I could feel their gaze boring into my back, but I made it without incident to my apartment. Since then, I have made notes on everyone else in town, and they all seem normal, except for the neighbors across the yard. So I don't know how many people really believe in ghosts or the paranormal, or in people who say they can see them. I would never say I'm some professional psychic or medium. I'm not. I just know I've always been able to see things other people couldn't, hear things other people couldn't, knew things other people didn't. Pretty much my whole life. I felt like a freak and a weirdo for a long time, until I just realized this is happening, and it isn't going away, so I needed to accept it. I got help from professional mediums and the woo-woo community, and it helped. Backstory, but important. I was laying in bed in my room a couple years ago trying to fall asleep. It was a long hallway, and my sister's room was at the end. So was my mom's. My sister had a friend over who was dealing with an abusive boyfriend, and they were drinking and talking about it. This will be important. You know how you get the feeling someone's watching you? Or that feeling in a store when you just know someone stepped into your space? You don't have to look, you just know. That's what I felt. I looked up, and there's some girl with her head poked into my room sideways. I just saw her head sideways, leaning past my doorframe. She looked shorter, maybe 20s, long black hair, kind of like the girl from The Ring. I'm looking at her wondering what she wanted, and she started to smile. Slowly, her eyes got huge and black, and her jaw unhinged into this huge, sick, pitch black smile. Ice cold slammed into the pit of my stomach as I just stared at her for what felt like hours, frozen in fear, before what I'd been taught kicked in, and I made her leave. She instantly turned back to normal and skipped off down my hallway toward my sister's room. I thought, oh, it's with my sister's friend. Depression and abuse and all of those bad situations can really attract those types of beings, so I didn't think anything of it. Fast forward to literally last night. It's been years. My parents got divorced, which is a whole other post of creepy shit. I realized it wasn't just my dad that was the narcissist. It's absolutely my mom, too. They were a toxic pair. And currently I'm in a situation where I have to live with my mom. It's fine. It's free. I'll be grateful and deal with it. Last night I'm laying in my bed watching TV, minding my own business. Suddenly, I feel that feeling again. It's always the same feeling regardless what type of ghosty it is. For me anyways. I look at my door, and it's the exact same girl. I asked her what she was doing here. She didn't answer. She just started smiling. Only this time, her eyes went white and her mouth grew into the same huge black grin. But she had tons of teeth like a shark. This is where a professional medium could figure all the ins and outs of who and what and where and how, but I'm not that good. I get up to get my license, drives them out, and she runs in the direction of my mom's room. I go out into the hallway to look in that direction, and I see through my mom's cracked door this weird demon girl literally sitting crouched on top of my mom staring at me, like she's an animal claiming her prey. It was wild. I've never, ever seen anything like that before. I also realized this girl was never with my sister's friend. She was with my mom for however many years. But my mom's a crazy and a very, very negative person regardless what anyone does to help her. She loves drama and loves being a victim and loves complaining. So, it's matching her energy, I guess. This ghost girl feels more like a bully than anything truly demonic. Like she had fun picking on people. Which my mom absolutely does too. This ghost girl can't hurt me. She's just around. And man, it sure is scary when she is. She looks like an absolute demon, that's for sure. I've since seen other types of entities in her room at night while she slept, and have told her about it. She says I'm crazy in one sentence, and then in the next, says how it does feel dark. We shall see. This might be a different story to what I used to write. If you do not know who I am, I write stories about people's experiences with creepy and unnatural occurrences. So this time, I decided to write about my own story. This story starts when I was 15. I was sitting at home in the small town of Freedom, Pennsylvania. I live in a small neighborhood with only 4 houses surrounded by some woods. When I was airing at home, I was alone. My parents went to a bar, leaving me behind since they were hanging with their friends. I got used to this since this was a reoccurring event. As I was sitting there, I heard a knock on the door. I didn't think this was scary because I called my friend asking for him to come over. As I went to the door, I heard something huffing, as if it ran a marathon, catching its breath. I looked out in the peephole, trying to see if I could see who was outside making that noise. I was unable to see what that noise was. I got a phone call soon after. It was my friend. He stated he was going to be late because his tire on his car popped, and he needed to replace it. I told him to be careful since it was late at night. As I was walking back to the gaming room, where I was originally in, I heard the knocking again, only this time it came from the back door. I tried ignoring it this time, so I went back to the gaming room. The knocking stopped for an hour. By then, my friend came over. Let's call him Jason. When Jason and I were playing video games, we both heard a knocking. However, this time was different. I heard the knock from the front door, but Jason heard it from the back. I couldn't figure out what was happening because we both heard different knocking. We tried to brush it off as our imagination from playing horror games all night, but we couldn't. The knocking went on and on. We were getting tired of it. Just then, my phone rang. It was my parents. They said they were going to sleep at a friend's house. Jason and I both agreed that Jason would stay over, since we were both scared at this point. We were getting thirsty, so we both got up and grabbed a couple of Mountain Dews. We were both surprised because the knocking stopped. We both decided to check the back door to see if we saw anything. The way my house is set up is the kitchen table is next to a window that we can see the back door from. We sat down at the table and saw a piece of paper near the door. We couldn't make out what it read, so Jason went to go get it. When he came back, we opened up the letter. The letter only had 3 repeating words on it. Knock, knock, knock. We don't know what it meant, but then we heard a knocking. This time it wasn't on any doors. The knocking sounded like it was coming from inside the house. I'm glad I left my bat downstairs. It was only a few steps in front of Jason. He grabbed the bat. We both quickly got into the gaming room. We felt safe there since it was so bright in that room. By the time we got into the room, the knocking had stopped. We both sighed in relief. I don't know when or how, but we both fell asleep. I forgot to mention earlier, but when we heard the knocking, it was only 11 p.m. When we woke up, it was 7 a.m. We both were tired, but then I noticed something on Jason. It was 2 cuts that were on his arms. We don't know when he got those. But Jason said they didn't hurt. When we woke up, we failed to notice that on the walls was a message. It said the same 3 words over again. Knock, knock, knock. My parents didn't come home that day. Jason had to go home because he was scared. They left me alone in the house. That night was different. There was no knocking. This time, it was scratching. I heard something scratching at the door, It sounded like a dog wanting to come in. Once again, I heard the huffing. It was currently 11 p.m. I like to call that time the knocking hour. Silly, I know, but it keeps me aware of what time it is. When I heard the scratching, it was coming from the back door. This time was different. I saw something that will haunt my dreams forever. It was a tall, dark figure. It looked like it was 6 feet tall. It was slumped over, and it was taller than the door. I silently went back to the gaming room and tried to go to bed. Needless to say, I never went to bed. My parents came home the next day. When I woke up, my back felt strange. When I went to take my morning shower, I saw that something was carved into my back. It said those goddamn words over and over. Knock, knock, knock. That was the last time I heard the knocking. It's stopped since then. My parents didn't believe me when I told them what happened. I tried calling Jason to see if he told his parents, but I was met with terrible news. Jason had ended his own life by hanging. My eyes filled with tears as I was told the news. My parents said that his note only had 3 words written on it. Knock, knock, knock. That leads me to believe that that monster was haunting him too. I'm sorry, Jason. To this day, I blame myself for what happened to you. I'm really sorry. As I'm writing this now, it's 11 p.m. I'm still living at my old house. I'm going to get some water and I'll continue to write. On second thought, I need to stop writing. I can hear something, probably that thing, knocking on my door. I can't help but to think about what me and Jason have gone through all those years ago. As I'm finishing this, I'm crying. I can't stop hearing those scratching and knocking sounds.